Hi everyone, thanks for joining. This is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of professional curiosity, but hopefully it will be useful. So my name's Julia Hambleton. I'm currently the Practice Development Lead at West Northants Council. I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for around 20 years. I've only ever worked in social care in children's and adults. And at the moment I'm organising training, so this is quite timely really to prepare this particular topic. Just to be mindful, if you want to put anything in the chat, please do. Chloe will be watching that because I might not necessarily put your hand up, but otherwise I'd encourage you to just unmute and ask a question if you want to, or make a comment, but I will put pauses in through that. Because hopefully you won't be just listening to my voice for the next 45-50 minutes, and we'll participate with some of your own experiences, because we know we all learn best that way. So I have tried to deliver this so that we get an overview of what we mean by professional curiosity, how our own perspective from our different agencies and personal values might influence our professional judgments, and examples of when that happens, what happens, recognise when to test information, and I think importantly to be conscious of barriers to professional curiosity, so that we're stopping and questioning ourselves periodically. Is there something I'm not seeing? Am I trying to get work too quickly? Or so on, and I've provided some resources at the end which I'll introduce to you. So yeah, if I'm rushing, slow down. I'm just conscious that there's a lot to get through. This is flicking through of its own will. I'm going to there we go. Yeah. So really, I just want to start with asking people what they think professional curiosity means or is. There is currently no single definition, but I think that's evolving now, so that we're becoming clearer on how to articulate what we mean by this, because it's being cited more and more and more in serious adults reviews, children's reviews, and so on. So I wanted to ask people if they had any thoughts about what it means to them. Any words? There's no silly answers. Does anyone want to hazard an example of what they think it is? Anyone brave enough to?
I mean, is it fundamental? Oh, sorry, I can't see if any hands are up or not. I mean, is it fundamental that you should actually see the person when you're actually engaging with somebody? Because so often in some of the serious case reviews, it seems that people have listened to other people's views of what's going on. Maybe carers. So, I mean, is it about actually hearing it first hand?
That's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. So that's one of the key things, taking information at face value. And actually, professional curiosity refers to really the idea that we need to be digging underneath the surface or testing the information we hear. Obviously, and there's a lot of different roles here I can see. I'm so sorry we haven't got time for introductions, but I can see people from several different agencies. So, and I imagine some of you will only ever talk to people by phone or on Teams, or your work is very light touch or across a reception desk, or there's going to be. It's obviously really important to see a person if you can, but if not, signpost them to someone who can, or signpost them to someone who can make further inquiries where you pick up on something that isn't quite right. But we'll go through that. But yes, great answer, thank you. Does anyone else have any thoughts about what professional curiosity means?
Hi, Julia. Sorry, go ahead, whoever that is.
No, Patricia, you go ahead. I was just going to say that there's some answers in the chat.
Well, let's have a look. Thank you, Chloe. Yeah, exactly. Looking and exploring more about the situation, having a more holistic view. Exactly that. Sometimes we have too much pressure to do that. Definitely not making assumptions. I think most of us have learned the hard way what it is to make assumptions, even when you don't recognise that you are, and how that can impact on the work that you do. Definitely, Sarah, taking an active interest, and delving deeper. I think that's really important. Again, sometimes we feel like there's too many barriers to prevent us from doing that, but I think it's also really important to recognise when we need to do that. We are working with limited resource and high demand. Yeah, no, professional curiosity involves exploring and proactivity. Never heard that saying. I presume that means being proactive. But yeah, thank you. That's great. Yeah, that's a lot of it in a nutshell. And we'll look at all of the sort of issues in the ways in which that's appeared in serious adults reviews and all that, how that translates into our practice. So, and try and move this on. So RIPFA have research in practice for adults have actually provided, tried to provide those characteristics that promote professional curiosity in practitioners. They say that, and I think they're evolving into what a definition of professional curiosity would be. Hopefully you've heard of research in practice and research in practice for adults. It's a really excellent resource for, they do a lot of research, publish a lot of research around different areas of practice. But I've provided links to some of this at the end because some of it is open access. So RIPFA say practitioners with these characteristics that you see here are more likely to be professionally curious. So the people with the right personality traits, i.e. people who want and like acquiring knowledge, I think most of us here would fit into that category. Some people describe people in public services as nosy, interested in other people's business. I think those are really positive, actually really interested and curious about people and what it is that has created the situation they're in or makes them tick, or you know what's going on around that person. Also people with that attitude and outlook who are quite tenacious and determined, people who are willing to explore new ideas. We will look at these things in more depth because they come up in the Safeguarding Adults reviews. And behaviours is a really key one. Practitioners who are willing to ask questions to get full perspective, who are alerted by tensions, have that sort of gut feeling and are willing to follow it up, and are brave enough to hold some challenging and difficult conversations. We know that this is something that people tend to gain confidence in as they progress in their experience, in their whatever role they're in. And I guess the challenge for us, which we'll look at later, is how we support people to not hold back on that, because we know that it's when people aren't brave enough to ask those questions or challenge information they've heard from others that issues are likely to arise or information's missed. So yeah, and those practitioners with communication skills, who can reflect, who ask questions and can evidence practice-based legal literacy, are more likely to be professionally curious, because those guys are going to be keener on being able to evidence that they're practicing in the way that they should, or they're upholding people's rights, or they are working within their statutory framework. Whistle stop taller. So yeah, as I've said, some of these characteristics will enable practitioners to dig more deeply. Some of you said that in the chat, thank you. Use skilled questioning, sort of make connections between different bits of information. And I think I've used this, RIPFA used this stage to be confident in respectfully challenging. And I think that's a really important term, because there's also respectful uncertainty. I don't know if anyone's heard that. And a couple of you said, we need to be cautious at taking other professionals, other agencies, other people information at face value. So one of the key things that we need to adopt is that respectful uncertainty, that, okay, I acknowledge the information, thank you, it's useful. We need to information share, but you also need to test it. You also need to recognise that as agencies, we tend to be coming from our different approaches with our own agendas, and we need to work together, but also understand that there might be more behind the information that's shared than that person has been able to share or is aware themselves, or it might have come from you know, a position of bias based on what their agency is focusing on and so on. So yeah, respectful challenging, but we'll come back to that. And there's a tool to help you really understand how to test information that you hear at face value that I'll introduce at the end. So yeah, practitioners who have these characteristics will be able to identify potential or abuse and neglect because they are digging that bit deep, they are asking questions, they can risk assess and see when a situation is potentially abusive or something might happen, and are more likely therefore to intervene early and take preventative approaches before things become a crisis or more serious. And more key, yeah, we've got to work in a person-centred way. So that, you know, the comment about should we see a person? Well, ideally we need the people we work with to sort of lead the narrative on their experience. Obviously, with that respectful uncertainty in some instances. Now, I just wanted to tell you about these different pieces of research, and I think they're really important to make us aware of why things happen or why our curiosity is challenged. So this first article, I don't know if you can click on the link outside of this and it'll take you to it, but if you Google that, it would come up. I think this is a really interesting piece of research, and it's based on an American study. In 2020 it was published, but it was a longitudinal study, so it took place over around 8 years. And the researchers in this study involved around 6,500 children, so it was a significant study, and they were looking at what is it that's killing curiosity in school children, and this is relevant to us and how we sometimes keep quiet when we should. You know, there's an element of social conditioning in this that it's useful to be aware of. So the researchers in this particular study, they looked at levels of curiosity from infanthood up to high school, up to those children who were entering high school, so which would be our year 6 to 7. Yeah, they'd sit in the corners of classrooms, they interviewed different people and looked at where curious children performed best, and they concluded with children are born curious, we're all born curious. And they gave an example of a toddler. They recorded some toddlers asking between the age of 14 months and 5 years old. They asked an average of 107 questions an hour, some even more than that. So really significant period of learning, curiosity, questioning the world around them. Anyone in the room who's had small children will know that a lot of them are constantly asking questions. And this is, you know, this is normal. This is our, I hesitate to use the word normal. I take that back, but it is a common experience that children are very inquisitive. But as they progressed in the research, they recognised that this questioning really dropped significantly once people entered school. So the youngest children were still asking around 2 to 5 questions in each 2-hour period. But then once they got to 10 or 11 years old, no questions at all. And the examples they gave, the evidence they found for why this is because teachers were focusing on targets, so discouraged questioning. This is where I think it starts to sound familiar with some of our world. So, you know, they gave examples of a child putting a hand up to ask about a thunderstorm that was going outside the window, and the teacher would say, I think I can see a hand up. The teacher would say, no, we haven't got time for that, we've got to stay on track. And let me have a quick look at who's got a hand up there. I'm a guest, so I can't look. Whoever's got their hand up, please unmute and speak. Hello, perhaps it's an accidental hand. Ah, Nicola. Nicola, is that an accidental hand? I'm just going to carry on. If anyone wants to say anything, just unmute. So yeah, as I say, they weren't asking any questions by the time they got to high school age. And it was around the teacher saying, we've got too much to get through, the class is too big, we haven't got time to entertain questions. So that sort of shows how we how education conditions us, because it has its own targets to achieve, it doesn't allow space for curiosity. And that continues into the workplace. So I've cited one other study here that's published on LinkedIn, and there's loads of these if you Google them that all say very, very similar things. And it looks at what is it that stops us as adults. This is a UK-based research, and these are the list of things which I think will sound familiar to most of us. So an extreme discomfort with being seen as wrong prevents us from asking questions, and maybe that's a hangover from when we were younger, being told, no, shush, we haven't got time for this, that fear of failure, overvaluing certainty over inquiry. I think we all come across this in our jobs. We just want to get a resolution as quickly as possible. We will take information at face value when we want certainty. Having siloed departments in our organisations prevents curiosity. I think we've all experienced that, and this is what happens when resource becomes so overstretched that actually we all go into silos to protect ourselves, minimise the amount of further work we can do. There's lots of different and natural reasons for that happening, but it prevents that open dialogue, that open questioning, those things that make us interested in what's going on around us. Having a very hierarchical culture kills curiosity. That's, the same that we'd find in schools. The teacher tells you not to ask a question, you don't. And that over-reliance on short-term performance over long-term gains. This obviously isn't something any of us want to experience, but I think most of us here will agree these are familiar things in our organisations, particularly at times of high demand. So the focus shifts, and that prevents us potentially, or some of us, actually exercising that curiosity, giving work more depth, because it can take much more time. Has anyone got, I just want to ask if anyone's got any comments about that. Sound familiar? Don't want to just hear my voice. Anyone? Nope, I'm going to assume not then. So I have looked at now some serious adults reviews, if I can move this on. Right, and these, I've just picked 3, and I just looked at the latest published SARS, and you will find that the stuff we've just talked about and highlighted finds itself in here, which is no surprise. This is the outcome of not being able to, or practitioners not being curious. This isn't entirely negative. The 3 I've chosen, and like I say, you can Google this and go into the SARS links, which I've also put in the resources. You can go and look at any SARS. Actually, they also outline a lot of positive practice. But in these and in many of them now, professional curiosity has been frequently cited. So those things we've talked about. So the first one I looked at was Person D. So this is quite recently published, 22, they all are. He was a young man who was found deceased in his flat. D shared his flat with Person E, who slept on the sofa. There was a complex relationship, and records showed that they cared for each other, potentially. That information wasn't really tested. Person D had a background of trauma. He had a serious car accident in his teens, and then led to addiction to opiates. He experienced bullying at school. His girlfriend was murdered. He was addicted to street drugs and alcohol. So this is someone we will all have come across in our different agencies. I mean, people with these scenarios. He became known to services because in the year before his death, his health was failing. He had liver failure. He was offered services and accepted these for a time, but had variable engagement, so would dip in and out of that. The key findings from this was gaps cited as gaps in professional curiosity, mental capacity, understanding and application of that, and safeguarding procedures. And you will find the 3 things cited in almost all SAR as at different levels as playing a contributory factor. It would not necessarily have prevented some of these deaths or serious incidents, but key factors in how, lack of these in how we responded. So we didn't always respond as well or as fully as we should. And what the Safeguarding Adults Review found was actually the social worker didn't meet with the person in a different agencies. There were lots of different reports from different agencies, but they tended to focus on this narrative of self-neglect rather than looking at the relationship between Dee and those that Dee was involved with, which indicated there was an abuse narrative that was being overlooked by his self-neglecting, he drinks, he weren't always engaged. No one ever really dug deeper, and it said that questions were missed or should have been asked in relation to the nature of Dee and E's relationship. Was this cuckooing? Was this abuse? There were allegations of physical assault and evidence of assault seen. I don't know if that was E or the other people that were hanging around this guy's flat. But they were never explored, so they can't be fully answered. There's also concerns around sexual abuse from E to D. So yeah, there seemed to be, in summary, some codependency, but an assertion that he was looking after Dee when in fact that wasn't necessarily the case, and it might have been the relationship with E and the people around him that prevented Dee from accessing services. It might not. It might have been a factor, but essentially there were a lot of issues such as it was during COVID, so there was agencies adopted an approach of not going out and seeing people, and actually that acted as a barrier for people really seeing what was going on. But neighbours were reporting concerns. There was a Section 42 inquiry initiated, but this was 2 weeks before person D died, so it was too late really for any positive action or any meaningful interventions to take place at that point. So, and it's for all of those things, it was just mainly that no one asked those questions. What is their relationship? He says he's a carer, Dee agrees, but actually no one really challenged that, dug around that, explored much further into it to see if that was really the case. So Cheryl is the second one I looked at, and I will refer back to these. How are we doing for time? Half an hour. I will refer back to these. So Cheryl was 74 and died at home of natural causes. This SAR was undertaken because concerns were raised about how she was living at the end of her life. She was cared for by her husband, and practitioners relied on the husband for information when concerns are raised. No one actually went to the house, tried to establish their view, saw the conditions that they were living in. And in all of the records, they found Cheryl's voice completely absent. So prior to her death, her house had become a state of disrepair. It found that a carer's assessment was never offered, and it was never explored whether her husband could make the decisions for her that he was. So his care for his wife came from a good place, but actually he really struggled to provide the care that she needed. So when concerns were raised about how she was presenting or numerous missed appointments, people didn't ask. They just asked her husband, is everything okay? He'd say yes, despite the evidence that was being shown to them or being reported from a variety of agencies. No one really looked into it. So therefore we didn't fulfil our statutory duties to either Cheryl or her husband. And actually they could have accessed more support in a way that this couple wanted to be more comfortable at that point in their lives. So the last one I had a look at apologies for my technical skills or lack of, is Derek. So Derek was a 69-year-old man with a learning disability. He has a number of health conditions and he was found dead in his home. He'd been struggling to take his medication the way he needed to treat his diabetes, but he had numerous health issues. So in the months leading to Derek's death, he had he'd experienced a decline. He had lived independently, but had then experienced a decline in his physical health and mobility. He had felt less safe and happy in his flat. It had become in poor state. Different agencies had referred these things in, but actually no one really collated the information and put it all together. It said to a couple of different people he wanted to die, that he wanted to end his life. He felt out of control of his life, and he was worried that people, those who did make concerns, were making decisions about him and not including him. So he had started to gain a level of mistrust for people, which made it harder for him to engage or trust. And the findings for this showed, again, a lack of professional curiosity in relation to risk assessment, his carers' needs, who was his need, his rapidly escalating health needs. Why was this happening? He'd had multiple hospital admissions, was refusing services or fearful of services, it may have been. You know, we can't know now, but certainly the outcome indicated that. So because no one put all of these different referrals from health agencies and other agencies and the carer together, they didn't see that actually there was a pattern indicating that this guy needed someone to establish a relationship with him to understand the risk factors that he was facing, how he was living, and, you know, whether his home conditions could have been improved and his self-care could have improved, or we could have got services in potentially to support him. So we know in an ideal world, nobody would want these things to happen. And a lot of these reviews will, you know, COVID will have interfered with, a lot of the more recent ones would have interfered with actually agencies' engagement with people. But it's really, I've pulled out these ones because they
Julia, you've just gone on mute.
technical skills. Sorry, I don't know where I got to there. But yeah, they're all indicating this a very similar thing. And that's this lack of professional curiosity. No one asking questions, no one actually taking time to look at the whole picture, even when the information is there and shared between other agencies. And why is this happening? And how can we prevent it from happening? So there's three things to look at before we look at, or to be aware of, we look at potential solutions. So we've looked at barriers to professional curiosity in our practitioners' work, in our own direct work, in our organisations and in interagency working, because again, these are the things that the SARS tell us where the issues are. So the things that might be a barrier to us working directly with people is disguised compliance, where we hear this phrase repeatedly where someone's like, as in Cheryl's case, the husband, yeah, everything's fine and we're managing fine, they might present well, but actually no one's sort of looked at the cues that are saying you need to dig a bit deeper and look beneath the surface of this work. Being overly optimistic, I think someone said this in the chat earlier, this is correct. So we can, if we're under resource pressure, say, sorry, someone's at my door. If we're under pressure to be efficient in how we work cases, we might be overly optimistic in seeing the positive and saying everything's fine here, we can close. And that would have happened in Cheryl's case repeatedly, and potentially in Derek's situation, saying no, he's saying I'm fine, go away, okay, that's good, we can move on to the next piece of work. Again, this is what the SARS shows us, we're not seeing the whole picture, we're just going in to look at individual problems. Most often our agencies might receive a referral about one thing, and that might be the tip of an iceberg or an indicator to a wider problem. If we're going in and saying, okay, they've only highlighted this as an issue, we're going to go and deal with that or discuss that and move on, not actually look at the whole picture and where that one piece fits into the whole puzzle. Normalisation. We're not very good at challenging what's perceived to be normal, so people have a different acceptance of different scenarios that they might say, this is how things usually are that we see. Actually, there is no normal, and we can't normalise situations to help ourselves understand them better. And I think professional deference, again, this is where that's saying respectful uncertainty is really important. So we might liaise with each other as professionals, and we trust each other and we hold each other's views in regard, hopefully. But actually we risk having some deference to those who we consider to be of a higher position than us, or of admirable in some way in the role that they're in. And we need to be really cautious about this. We can be respectful. Again, this is that respectful uncertainty. You know, we need to undertake our own evidence collection, our own assessment of situations. We need to include each other as agencies. We need to hear each other's information, but it's based on evidence, not on the information giver's position or whatever respect we have for them. Confirmation bias is really important. We need to avoid this. You know, we might have already formed an opinion or a review of the situation, and we're just looking for those indicators that tell us we're right. We all need to be prepared to change our minds when we see a different set of information. And we have to be able to ask ourselves this: am I looking for things that fit my narrative or my understanding of a situation? You know, can I change the view I've formed of this situation given new information or seeing something differently? And so on. These are things that will be familiar to most of you. And I think confidence in managing tension, this tends to happen with less experienced people, where they are dealing with conflict, or there is tension in, say, between a carer and a cared for, or in a group of people, or in a multi-agency forum. And they might not have confidence to question or challenge when they should, or to manage a tension that might arise from them asking questions. I hope that makes sense. As I say, if anyone has got anything to say, please do. In interagency working, this is really important for all of us. We know this from inquiry after inquiry after inquiry. There are things where we need to get better at understanding each other's roles, the roles of each other agencies, and actually what isn't within the remit of each other's agencies, so that, you know, that addresses a lot of challenge that we often have. We often don't understand criteria for referrals, so we might refer to someone, feel frustrated that it's saying no, it's not for us, and vice versa. So we need to get better at talking to each other about what we do. Someone's trying to come in. We need to understand our own roles and responsibilities and that of others in our teams. We need to be much more confident in information sharing and communication when this is proportionate. I haven't included that in this hour, but there is a information sharing again and again, either oversharing or undersharing. People are fearful of this. You know, I would advise that you look at or Google 7 golden rules of information sharing. And there's some really simple and easy to use flowcharts that you can just print off. Should I ask for information? Should I share information? When is it proportionate and justifiable? I should have put one at the end of here, but if you Google that, it will come up, and there's stuff you can print off and use to actually answer some of those questions and allay some of those sort of apprehensions in doing that, so that you understand your role and responsibility. So yeah, interagency working is really important. We have to get better at working together and understanding each other and what we do. And RICFA will come back to this particular issue, because RICFA talk about this in their strategy for how to address these issues. Finally, organisational features. And again, really important. These are the things that prevent professional curiosity. Poor supervision. I think in a lot of our agencies, we will hear this time and time again. Practitioners need to have regular, critically reflective supervision. They need to be given a forum where they can look at different work from different perspectives, be challenged in their view of a piece of work, feel comfortable that, you know, if they feel overworked or the caseload's too high and they feel that some particular cases need that bit more input, they're getting supervision that recognises that and could be supportive. Poor supervision, you know, creates a siloed way of working. Again, complexity and pressure of work. We know that actually crisis work tends to take precedence. We've got more and more crisis work because we have, you know, less resource early on to do the preventative work that we're aiming for. Another thing that's cited in organisational features, changes of caseworker. We know this. Some cases you could have 10 workers by the time it gets to you. So everyone's starting again. Everyone with their own perspective, their own way of working, with their own networks that they're referring to, and information is lost and relationships with people are broken. So this is a less than ideal scenario to be working in, and definitely creates a barrier. And again, we have no magic wand for what's happening out there at the moment in agencies for staff turnover and so on. But this is something, again, Rick for visit in terms of how do we promote retention and reduce our sickness rate and to try and avoid these things happening. I think people not often, can close cases too quickly. And again, that's in response to being under pressure to do so. They've answered their initial focus of whatever their inquiry is, and they just want to move it on because it reflects on their caseload to have open cases that are unconcluded. Again, I think this is really important, the fixed thinking. We know that, you know, we all recognise practitioners, hopefully we don't do it ourselves, where we get, you know, as a survival strategy, we end up having very fixed ways and processes of addressing issues. We end up working in a process-led way. Okay, we're assessing someone, we're assessing a situation, we're not looking beyond that. And we're applying our whatever preconceived ideas we have and our own values to the scenario and not looking more widely at the issues. You know, this happens, I think, when people have been in organisations for a long time. We tend to see this kind of thing happening. And maybe, I think Rick suggests later on that this is around too much trust in staff that have been there a long time. And people should be respected for the length of time with organisations, but again, they need that regular supervision to make sure they're keeping motivated and their knowledge updated and they are questioning their own thinking. We all need that. It's really important that we have that. That lack of openness to new knowledge. We all know people in our agencies that never go to the training. They never want to update their knowledge. They claim never to have time to do so. They don't want to look beyond what it is they know. They think they know it all already. You know, that this is a real issue, and it's something that obviously is going to create barriers to not just professional curiosity, but to teamwork, to positive working, and so on. Yeah, and creative approaches are not supported or available. I think there is a reality to that. We know that with the resources we have, we are providing a range of rather limited options, but we do need to be encouraged to, when we come across an unusual situation or risky situation, we need to be encouraged to work together to think about ideas or that we could create to respond to a situation rather than trying to say, oh, this person won't accept X support. We need to actually think differently about the support and say not about the person who doesn't fit into it. So this is the more positive stuff. So Ritva, again, in the link, this briefing and these outlines, I've just picked up some key points. So I'm aware that we're running low on time. So I've just run through a handful of these and then I'll show you the tools we've got. Does anyone want to say anything at this point? I realise I'm kind of rushing through a little bit. I hope I'm not losing anyone. People are checking their emails in the background. But I assume you're all still out there. So Ritva have done this strategic briefing around professional curiosity, and they've looked at thank you Jane, there's somebody there. So they've looked at those particular factors that I've just talked about that appear in the SARS and in the research around professional curiosity. So one of the factors is time and capacity. I won't go into these in detail because you'll have these slides. You'll be able to look at and you'll be able to look at the strategy yourself. So practitioners who are under great pressure can be more vulnerable to the impact of complex practice issues, such as accumulating risk and so on, or bias. We know this. So RIPRA is suggesting, in an ideal world, this is what we're aiming for. Easier said than done, but we have to have a goal. That we need to actually be proactively reviewing our recruitment and retention practices, pay, learning and development and so on. We need to make sure they're available in our agencies and that people are accessing them, and that our staffing levels are as good as they can be to promote this. We need to look at strategies to promote. Hello? Someone want to say anything, or was that just a mic off? Is there a chat? Thank you to the people who said they're still here. I'm not alone. Okay, so we need. I think one of the things that gets lost when we're under pressure is that team time. I know that I've been in social work around 20 years. I think I said, and when in my early days when I first started, we worked in locality team in another authority, and it was just practice throughout those years that every month you had a team. It was attached to the team meeting. You'd have a morning where you'd have a CPD session. People would bring their cases. You could reflect on them from different perspectives. Talk about them, what works. We learn better from what goes well than what doesn't actually, and that is a better way to learn. We think about case law and legislation reviews that were coming up. It was really proactive, and everyone was expected to attend. It was a tea and cake event, and people really enjoyed that time of getting together and talking about the work they do. And actually, people felt a lot of pride and ownership with what they did when given these opportunities. Suzanne, is there something you want to ask?
Hi, Julia. Sorry to interrupt. I thought I'd speak when you'd finished, but
okay,
I just.
No, that's fine.
All right, I'll carry on just very quickly, just to make colleagues aware, and Jane can support this as our independent scrutineer. Sorry, I got a bit of a croaky voice this morning. As the local Safeguarding Adults Board, we are developing the opportunity for multi-agency practitioner forums. The first one will be held in September. We're hoping we'll give a little update on NSAB and the strategic priorities for the next 3 years, but also there's possibility that we might look at some case studies and just share that learning and the good practice. It's still in development, but watch this space. The Twitter account is always a good place to find out useful information as part of the Safeguarding Board. But really, I mean, it's also hopeful that actually agencies will be doing similar things in, their team meetings and having their own practitioner forums, hopefully. But yeah, watch this space. Hopefully it will be appreciated by everyone. I would also mention as well that we have recently sent out a practitioner survey that just came out at the beginning of the week, and again that will inform perhaps some of the subjects for discussion moving forward. So again, have a look at that, have a look on Twitter. There'll be a link there on the NSAB site, but speak to your safeguarding leads within your organisations and they can send you a link if it's not already been shared.
Lovely, thanks Suzanne for providing a seamless link. That wasn't rehearsed, but yeah, very welcome. It is one of the things. We're down to 10 minutes, so I'm just going to try and whip through these really. But that's one of the things that Rick was saying is really important, is to address those issues that we find in the interagency issues. Is they sort of look at suggestions for, we need to spend a bit more time together. So we need to have on it so that we're not communicating via a web form or a referral or a phone call, that actually we need to have more to do with each other to establish those relationships, that we do understand our roles better. And then we're not making unnecessary referrals, and we are having more effective conversations, and we are using our different areas of expertise and knowledge to actually provide that reflection of options or creative thinking or different ideas. It's so important that we get better at doing that. And we know that we're all challenged in doing so because of, you know, how stretched everyone is at the moment. But actually, the benefit of doing so could lend itself to easing some of that. So actually, yeah, multi-agency practitioner forums, or even, you know, could key people in organisations spend little bits of time in each other's teams, you know, to share information. Can we facilitate those opportunities somehow? And maybe that forum that Suzanne's just talked about might be an opportunity to facilitate some of those discussions. So yeah, supervision and support. I did want to pick out this one because this comes up again and again and again, that actually supervision drops when line managers are very busy, and it tends to be case focused only. So there isn't that time for critical reflection, which is the thing we need. And we need to support our practitioners to become really confident in asking difficult questions and hearing other perspectives and knowing when to dig beneath the surface, knowing what those cues are. You know, especially as we're working less and less or more remotely. You know, there's not many teams now that are sitting together all week like we did in the olden days before pandemics. You know, and actually it has its benefits. Being more agile definitely has its benefits, but it takes away those informal opportunities for reflection, learning from our colleagues, overhearing conversations that are really useful to know. So supervision in that environment becomes even more important than it did before, and it needs to be robust and of really good quality. I know we've got an excellent template that should promote critical reflection in and actually how the worker is and where they're at and their well-being, and are there tensions that might be impacting on their performance. We've got a really good template, but people have, you know, whatever template or policies you provide people, they've got to be encouraged to actually use it the way it should be used so that it's meaningful. And these things, you know, that kind of robust support from our line manager and our teams are the thing that keeps us going in difficult times. They're the thing that are going to keep you turning up. That's the thing that's going to, you know, keep you from tipping over the edge into sickness or say, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm going to work for the National Trust or Tesco's or wherever else. Not saying that doesn't have its stresses, but everyone will have had those thoughts. So yeah, legal literacy, it's really important we're providing the right level of training within our agencies and for each other. Some of this could be shared. You know, our practitioners need to know what their obligations are, and in doing so, they're more likely to really explore their cases to make sure that they've met those responsibilities. So we all need to have a look at our learning and development office and who is accessing them, because we do also find that only particular people turn up at the trainings. Actually, not managers at all levels tend not to feel like they have the time to do that, and we need to support them to be able to access that and address it so that they can support their practitioners. Promoting an open culture, I think this is really important, where hierarchy doesn't rule, and actually, you know, every single person in your teams, from the admin person to the director, should be able to talk to each other, share ideas, ask questions, and that should be normal in the organisation. No one should feel threatened or challenged by that. It needs to be promoted. Partnership working, I think I've done that. And I think Suzanne's contributed to that. So I'm going to skip through that because we've only got a few minutes. So a couple of tools, we are coming to the end, that I'm going to leave you with, I think are massively helpful. I use these all the time with practitioners. So this is called the discrepancy matrix. You might find yourself with a situation where you're not really sure, I really don't know what to do with this or what it means or anything. This is a really simple diagram. There is a link for this which might explain it in more time than I have to do now. But really, all the information you get to weigh your decisions on needs to be evidence-based. So you want everything to be in that top left corner in firm ground. But you'll often find when you arrive with a scenario or you're presented with a scenario, a lot of the information you're given is ambiguous, i.e. third party, it's come from somewhere else, it needs testing, or you're making assumptions. So when you try it. If we were in a longer session, I would ordinarily have people talk through their cases and we'd do this together because it's such a fantastic tool. It's really useful. And what you'll find is if you actually write down, well, this is what I know as fact, or as close to fact as I can get, you know, i.e. this person is female, 48, and has this diagnosis, you know, there will be some stuff that you do have as fact, hopefully. So everything needs to be tested that you'll be able to put in that box there in the top left. But you will be surprised at how much information you find is actually third-party information untested. You've taken at face value, either from other agencies, people around in the informal network, the neighbours, whoever it's come from. And actually a lot of that, when you look at, okay, how can I evidence whether this is good information, factual, you'll actually find a lot of that you can't. And it gets rid of a lot of ambiguity by being able to discard some of that. And that assumption information is really important because it's okay, what do we think we know? What have we made an assumption about? When we've gone into a house and there's 7 people there, 2 adults, some children, an older person, are we assuming they're family, part of the same family? Are we asking questions about who's in the room? That's a really simple example. And that will show you by sifting out the information, it will show you what's missing. What do I need to test? What actually don't I know? Often what you don't know is way more important than what you do. And that's when you have to be curious. What is it that I don't know? What do I need to find out? What do I need to investigate or explore? What do I need to work with colleagues and other agencies to gather information on that person? So I'd recommend you give it a try. It's good to do in small groups or with a colleague. And like I say, there's a link to it. So where am I at? Yeah, and this is a bit of a summary that shows how you can test the information in that. Again, I haven't got time to talk through it. This is the last thing. You will have seen these 7-minute briefings, hopefully. They're a fantastic tool. You can put anything in them. And a lot of authorities are putting their SARS outcomes in them. You know, the idea being that people will pay attention or be able to give 7 minutes to giving information. So I just did one for professional curiosity. Neither NSAB nor WMC has sanctioned this tool. I literally just did it as an example. So, you know, if you read through these boxes that talks about professional curiosity, essentially it tells you what it is, what to look out for, what questions to ask, how to think, you know, and I'd encourage people, if I'd had time and I was more technical or had time to ask a colleague, I'd do, you know, a lot of them have done it in a circle. If you Google 7-minute briefing, professional curiosity, you'll see that lots of organisations have done these 7-minute briefings on those and on lots of other topics. And they can be a fantastic tool that you can just print off or have on your screen to look at, okay, what am I not thinking about here? If you're looking at closing a situation when there's that sort of niggly gut feeling you not quite able to articulate, you can go through this briefing or when you develop yourself. But I'll work on this a bit more and I'll share it with NSAB and WMC to see if actually it is useful to be published. But hopefully agencies are aware of this kind of way of delivering information and might develop their own. So that's it in a nutshell, guys. You'll be pleased to hear. I can hear my own voice. So links to resources here. Like I say, you'll get this. Some of it is really useful information. And I think this is a reminder before you go that you can click on the link and give feedback and collect a certificate. But I think we have a few minutes. If anyone's got any questions or thinks any more information would be useful, please say.